Good afternoon, one and all, and welcome to our webinar today from the People Experience Hub. While we're all just getting in and some people rolling in, let's see some comments in the chat from where is everybody watching this today. If you want to leave me a little, I'd love to know where everybody is. Rob, where are you in the world? Just remind me.
I am in Royal Leamington Spa in Warwickshire.
Beautiful part of the world as well. And Chris, whereabouts in the world are you today?
I'm on the south coast, sunny Brighton.
Oh, is it? And is the weather actually? Is it actually sunny?
It is actually sunny, yeah, which is remarkable. I can see some puddles, but there's sun, and I'm hopeful it'll stay sunny.
Stunning. And what about you, Deborah?
In Teddington, right beside the river in Bushy Park, so beautiful as well.
Great name for a place as well. I'm sure I've mentioned that before. Marvelous. I see we've got someone from Vancouver in today as well. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes. So where are you originally from?
South Africa.
Oh,
yes, we've gone global.
We've always been global. We've always been global. Deb, where in Canada are you originally from? I forget.
Just outside of Montreal, the Eastern Townships.
Okay. So he's not rivalry between you and Vancouver.
It's less exciting.
Yeah, my sister lives in Kamloops, which isn't too far from Vancouver. So.
Okay. So it's okay with you. You can sit with it. We've got someone from the drizzly Peak District. I am sorry that it is raining in the Peak District today. It is I'm currently in Oxfordshire, and it is delightful here today. I'm not going to lie. Amazing. Well, we just wait for a couple more people to roll in. Actually, that seems like a great time to introduce ourselves. So if you're new here, welcome to the People Experience Hub's webinars. My name is Ted. I'm the head of business development here. I've worked here for, I think, 4 months, but I've known the team for many, many years. And rather than telling you all about the wonderful things that we do around measuring employee experience, surveys, and kind of everything to do with the people science, the science of human beings. I'm going to let Rob introduce himself first. So, Rob, why don't you, who's my colleague, Rob, would you mind telling this wonderful audience who you are?
I am Rob Robson. I am the head of or director of people science here at the People Experience Hub. So I do some of the more interesting stuff, I think, around helping clients to formulate different surveys and to figure out what it all means at the end of the process.
Excellent. And it's always an exciting journey to go there. But that's enough from us. Let's hear from some of our other panelists. I want to jump over to Deb. Deb, you and I have known each other for an awfully long time, but would you mind telling our wonderful audience who you are, where you come from, what you're about?
Absolutely. So Deborah Ward, Canadian, Live, Love, Learn, founder, a consultancy business specializing in people service and culture, background in hospitality. So it's kind of looking after people's been in my DNA. Actually, it started before that because I have 3 little sisters, so who aren't so little anymore. But for me, it's always been about people service and culture. It's just, that's what gets me out of bed. It's what makes the world tick. It makes it exciting. It makes it interesting. And I would challenge you about the science of people. I think there's an art too.
I would agree with you. You stay out of this one, Rob. We'll get back to that. No, it's fine. We're also joined today by the wonderful Chris Britton. Chris, same question to you. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling everyone, our wonderful audience, who you are and what you're about?
Sure, yeah. So Chris Britton, People Experience Director at Reward Gateway. So for those who know Reward Gateway, perhaps don't, we are an HR tech company. So we help other businesses provide brilliant employee experiences to their people. And my background has accidentally and somehow always been mostly in retail up until I joined Reward Gateway. And I'm from, if you detect an accent throughout the whole thing, I'm not from quite as far away or glamorous as Canada. I'm from the lovely streets of Belfast in Northern Ireland, but my accent is extremely muddled. So forgive me.
I bet you, though, if you have a couple of drinks, it kicks in.
Yeah, a couple of drinks or a couple of conversations with people who still have the accent, then it's like straight back into the swing of things. And I guess my role, by the way, at RG is people experience. So it's everything that the employee lifecycle encapsulates and making sure that we get all of those bits right. So I'm really thrilled that topics like experience mapping and everything else are getting more and more popular. And because I guess it's something we all love, right?
Absolutely. I was over the moon when you said yes to this as well, because I know some of the work, just as an alumni from RG myself, like I understand like how much the business takes care of its people and really puts time and effort into understanding it. But I was just absolutely thrilled knowing the journey that you guys are on, and particularly going through like an M&A at the moment and trying to figure out all of that. I know this stuff is absolutely critical to you. So thank you for joining us. So, like, a few quick bits of housekeeping. If there is a fire where you are, please leave. I just need to state that on a webinar, but there we go. Just going to throw it out there. We are recording this session, so if you do have to duck out, or if any of you think any of your colleagues would find this interesting, we'll be sending that round to you. If you're watching us live on LinkedIn, hello, feel free to leave some more comments in there. They also show up in my screen, so I will be able to do that. If you have any questions as we're going along, please do feel free to throw them in the comments. We are going to be having a fairly in-depth conversation about all the things to do with employee experience mapping, but that doesn't exclude us from stopping and getting into some like really fine details. So feel free to throw anything out along the way. At the end, we will also be doing the Q&As as well. So if it's a real left field question, we'll come back to it at the end. Don't you worry. But let's get started. Well, as we're here, and I feel very well caffeinated at this moment in time. I wanted just to start actually with like, what is employee experience mapping? Because I think I've got a view of it I've come from like a kind of tech background, and I've seen things, and like from marketing and sales background, where we look at experience mapping, whether that's like the journey someone goes on from understanding something and like falling right into your marketing funnel all the way through to a purchase. And I know that's kind of the origins of it. Chris, I wonder if you've got a view or like a good way to explain like what an employee experience map even is.
Yeah, I think that what we've kind of touched on there is how I think about it as well, is from a customer experience perspective. Just swap out the word customer and add in employee, and swap out products and, you know, insert your processes, ways of working, ways of doing things, culture, so on and so forth. I guess it's about, would your employees buy from you, from a very simple marketeer perspective. And it's just mapping all of those bits out from end to end, thinking about from the moment they think about joining you, and all the great bits up until the point they decide to leave you, and even beyond that. And what are the bits that really matter to people, and how can we drive consistency throughout all of them to make sure that what we're doing is relevant? So that's how I think about it. And I think it's one of those topics of HR becoming more like marketeers is something I'm reading more and more about in various different blogs and listening to webinars and stuff. But yeah, just think about your people as your customers. Will they buy what you're selling?
I love that. That's such a great lens on it. Deb, have you kind of got a view as well? Because I know you've come at it from maybe a slightly different angle, but still with that, I remember your big piece for you was about creating great experiences for people. Is that kind of how you thought about it when you were building your businesses in the past?
Yeah, I kind of compare it. I guess mine's a little like more art and less science, but it's kind of like sitting at a coffee shop in France, right? You're watching everybody's movement from, you know, start to finish, and kind of seeing how it can be better for them in team member experience. I hate the word employee, by the way, just FYI. I know it's everywhere, and I know it's an HR term, but it drives me crazy. But in team member experience, it really starts even way before they're, you know, even thinking about it. It's about creating the reputation and building the brand that people are even interested beforehand. And to that end, it's very much like Chris said in retail, right? There's a lot of work that goes on before you get them on the hook, to make sure that they even want to come to the party. And so for me, it's really about creating that reputation and brand, which goes so much deeper than just mapping what they're doing, right? It's about creating the hype, being a marketer. Absolutely, Chris, I completely agree with you. You know, you're marketing what you're doing, and you're making people, and just making it so great that people want to join. You know, if you think about the great brands out there, and the ones that everybody always talks about, whether it's Google or Virgin or, you know, whatever, Walt Disney, it's because of the hype that's out there first, that draws them into the door. And so I think that's, you know, even before you even know that you've had a touch point with them, they've had a touch point with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They've like felt your almost like your brand presence, if you would think about it that way. I was going to lead on to like an interesting point about like sort of why is it useful? Why is it an important thing to do? Because it can feel, I think it feels a lot of this with marketing stuff. You often feel like you're just sort of writing stuff down for the sake of writing it down, right? And just like capturing data or feels very hypothetical and meta. Rob, from your perspective, I know you've done a few bigger pieces around this. Like, why are these employee experience maps so useful? What is it why is it so important, I think, for businesses to do it now?
That comes to the question of why map it rather than just kind of trying to create a great experience. Yeah. And for me, that's the fact that at different times during that, you know, employee life cycle or people experience, it's going to be managed. Those different elements are going to be managed by different people at different times. And so it's about creating coherence and helping everybody that's involved in that, giving them a steer as to what you're trying to create. So that bit of consistency as you work through, as well as capturing what will be different at different stage. But thinking of the experience as a whole is helpful.
Chris, would you? Oh, sorry, Zeb.
Yeah, I would also say, Robert, I think the great thing about mapping out the team member experience along the way is that we all have our own perceptions, point of views, biases that we're going to bring to it, regardless of how conscious we are of it. So by being a bit more scientific about it and capturing touch points from different times, different leadership, different a different path that people are walking on, then you're more apt to catch things that maybe you wouldn't naturally pick up.
I think that's really, really true. You can it's picking up those fine details. Chris, when we were talking before, I remember you mentioned that it's a piece of work that kind of you're looking at the moment, this sort of thing. And I think, like, again, for our audience's benefit, well, we've come to understand, why it's important. I'm sure there's a ton of great reasons alongside the ones we've just spoke about, apart from this hypothetical stuff. Where would you even begin? So, like, how would you even? Someone said, oh, you know what, we really need to understand our employee experience, and you've got a blank sheet of paper in front of you. Where do you start?
Yeah, and that's often the scary bit, right? Is where do you start? And I think one of the pitfalls of anything like this that sometimes stops people giving it a go. People think it can be really complicated, or it is really complicated, or it needs to be really complicated. And actually, I would say it's the exact opposite.
I agree.
Be as simple as you want it to be. Because the idea of particularly people experience mapping is it should be dynamic, it's fluid, because things keep changing, right? And I guess the best place that I could advise, where I know it works for me and the team at RG to start, is we are people as well. So what matters to us? Because one of the key bits of people experience mapping is identifying the moments that matter, right? That's the key phrase here, or the pain points or anything like that. And you empathize with your employees. So start with yourself as an employee. So think to when you first started or joined a previous business or cycled through a business, or the reason you left businesses in the past, whatever those reasons are, whatever that experience felt like, start there, because chances are your fellow human beings are feeling and thinking something similar, right? So that's a good place to start. But then where else is a better place to start than at the start? So once if you're trying to map it out, then think about, to Deb's point, what's drawing people in to your brand in the first place as a great place to work. So start at the start. And if you get that bit right, then I guess what you then challenge yourself to do is make sure that what you're hyping as being the reason to join your business, you then got to put stuff in place to make it true. So once they've joined and come through the doors, you're kind of holding yourself as a team to account for what you've promised up front. So that's the best place to start, is at the very start, and then work it forward from there. That would be my
experience. It's a lot.
Chris, I mean, one of the cool things I learned about was EY. They had a really challenging time attracting women into their organization. And they couldn't figure it out, right? So they went back to the beginning and they said, what are we doing wrong? And it was their adverts, right? For their job adverts, the font, the style, the pictures, the language they used. I mean, I love that you said start at the very start, because just those changes completely transformed the number of female candidates they got through the door. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and it's massive. If you don't know what good looks like, how are you ever going to make it happen, right? You can kind of thumb around in the dark and you might hit on it, but you're probably not going to. Whereas at least if you set your stall out up front to say, hey, this is what a great experience at this business looks like, then you can put all the other pieces of the jigsaw in place afterwards to make that true.
That's super interesting. And I think when we look at, because I think I always thought about it quite narrowly, and again, I'm fairly uneducated in it, but like understanding employee experience, you can start with like onboarding and you have it all the way through to exit, but you're absolutely right. There's this whole attraction piece, this employer brand and how people feel about you as a business. It's really critical. How do you maybe this is one, but I'll throw this out to the entire panel, so feel free to jump in, whoever's got an interesting answer. But how would you go about like even understanding that and measuring that kind of brand attractiveness at the moment? Where would you start with that?
Number of candidates per advert, right? Like how many people are applying per application, per job that you put out there. It's just you can tell if nobody's applying, either your advert's wrong, there's something wrong with your messaging, there's something wrong with your reputation, and the net promoter score. Like if your team members are not prepared to recommend you to their friends and family, then you've got it wrong.
Yeah, and I agree with both of those points. And the other bit that I would add on top of that, which is really interesting for us at RG, is asking people, why have you applied for us in the first place? Even if they're successful or unsuccessful in getting a job with us, let's find out what brought them to us in the first place. Is that inclusive language? Is that the brand itself? Is that they're a client of ours? Is it a friend told them about us? Whatever it might be. If we can harness what that information is, we can then do something with it to make sure we're elevating the good stuff and fixing the stuff which perhaps isn't so good.
Rob, would you agree with those points? And is there anything you'd like to?
Yeah, absolutely. And 100%. And then I think the other side of it is making sure then that what you're promising is what you need in terms of your overall business strategy, that you've got that alignment between who you're trying to attract, how you're trying to attract them, the brand that you're trying to create actually will feed, the ultimately successful, execution, if you like, of your overall sort of business vision and goals. So it's that bit about, and that coherence word of coming, at it from both sides. You could have, you could be brilliantly attractive potentially to the wrong people. So it's just about keeping that balance and making sure that it all fits together.
Making sure that sales meets ops.
Yeah.
That we promise, actually you get in the door and you don't find out that actually it's completely different, 100%. Which I'm sure we've all been there, right?
Yeah, no, which never. We know can be challenging. Yeah.
Amazing. So I think that's really clear. Like it's obvious we're not just talking about the people in our business at the moment, right? We're talking about people who might come and work here, but as well as people who have previously worked here. I was reading about again, it's one I hadn't really thought about, but this kind of idea about nurturing your alumni and having people who, because from my perspective, I've worked as an example, I've worked at Reward Gateway for nearly 2 years, and I would still refer and recommend people to go and work there, because I've still got friends who work there. That I had a fantastic time there. Chris, is that something you guys are thinking about as well? It must come up in your world, as it is right now.
Yeah, 100%. So I guess it's the life cycle of your people, right? So they start as candidates, they become employees. If they leave for whatever reason, they then potentially become customers and potential employees again of the future. So it would be remiss and a bit silly, really, to not, at the very least, leave on good terms. Once they leave afterwards, how do we make sure that they have exactly what you're describing, that kind of favorable impression of the brand? We've been having a conversation in the not too distant past internally at RG about retention. It's one of those key things, right? How long can you keep people, and trying to keep people for as long as you can? And we're kind of thinking about it slightly differently now, and accepting that the average tenure for employees now is probably the shortest it's ever been, right? So jobs for life don't really exist anymore. People are they've got other things going on in the world and other opportunities they want to explore. So if they're already going to stay with you for 2, 3, 4 years, which is somewhere in the region of the average for most, how do you make sure in that space of time you get as much from those people as possible in terms of helping them shape your future, helping you shape their future in terms of their skill set? Because if they leave and go and do wonderful things elsewhere, they can still advocate for you. They can still be a client of the future, or they might come back and work with you at some point in the future, maybe in a different role or a more senior position. So I guess it's about that recognition that when they walk out the door officially, they've never really left. As long as they leave on favorable terms, then you should do what you can to keep them engaged and sometimes even involved in what you're doing in the future.
One of my favorite quotes is, what if we invest in our people and they leave? And the reply is, what if we don't and they stay? Right?
Yeah. Exactly that.
Yeah. I think investing in people, and I've seen it time and time again, where people, they become, you're creating advocacy, right? You're creating advocacy for the brand, for the leadership, for the roles, for the potential, for the future. And if you can do that in the 3 years and help people along the way. And sometimes, right, their leaving is the best thing for both parties, because you know that they have potential that you can't offer them, right? So helping them get to where they want to go. And that's, to me, experience for our team members is looking at the whole person, right? It's looking at the human being. It's not looking at the employee. And that, I will use that term in that sense, because I think sometimes we do, what have you done for me lately kind of attitude, opposed to how do I help you to become the best citizen in the world that you can be, right? And if that's with our firm, great. And if it's not, then let me help you do that too, because it's only going to help us. And again, that I know that sounds a bit woo-woo and a bit, but that whole connectivity about human beings and helping people to be the best they can be can only help all of us.
I was one of the things that really drew me to you when we first met, Deb, was this kind of focus on the human. Because as we look at kind of mapping and the journey that people go through at work, you know, one of the big ones is going to be around how they develop, how they bring more of either themselves to work or really like just start to own the role. And I remember you had some really interesting things, particularly because in a hospitality business, you had some people who obviously were working behind the bar, but they had so much more to give your business. Do you mind just telling our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, we in all the businesses, one of the questions we ask on our team member surveys is what skill do you have that we're not using? And it's a really cool question because you find out amazing things about people, right? They're graffiti artists, or they make quilts, or they're musicians, or they're DJs. And so, you know what? You're going to have a team party, you pull on them, because then they get to showcase their passion in front of their colleagues, and you're showcasing the whole person, not just the employee or what you use them for in their workplace. And for them, the opportunity to showcase their passion to their friends and their colleagues is really profound. And it also gives us an opportunity to see maybe a different side, because let's be honest, we all kind of put people in boxes, right? We meet them, we spend time with them, and then we kind of categorize them. And I find that question often I've been like, whoa, I didn't know you wanted to, be a chef or whatever it was, and then help them get there. Right. Mm-hmm. Because I think that the time, if you're going to help them, we had one lady, I remember she wanted to be a midwife, which was completely different from what we were doing. And I was like, right, when do you want to do that? Right. And she said, well, I want to be able to do it the next 4 years. And I said, what does that look like? She said, well, I need to be able to go to school in these times. I'm like, okay, how do we make that happen? Do we job share? Do we find somebody to job share with you? And that's what we did. And she went on to be a midwife. But let me tell you, when she was with us, she was 150% with us, because she totally appreciated that. And, one of our biggest fans.
I love that. It's so very effective at creating those experiences, but just giving people a space, to be themselves and to show who they are. I think that's awesome. I want to just pop a pin in the sort of the different stages kind of conversation. We'll come back to that, because I think you touched on something really interesting there about the boxes that we put people in, because we absolutely, and certainly something we definitely do around people data and analytics. We kind of have to put people in certain categories and boxes. But it was something, Chris, you mentioned right at the beginning, before we jumped on today. It was about not just looking at kind of demographics of people and how we split them out. And I think, and when, again, as we're thinking about mapping the experiences that people have at work, two people will experience the same event and feel very differently about it, and completely based on, I think the word we used was persona. Would you mind just sort of elaborating on, I guess, what that means and why it's important to think about personas at work?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where how can you map out your people experience without really understanding who your people are? So that's a real key point to that, right? And this isn't about putting people in boxes necessarily. And it's about just having a little bit more of a deeper insight into who you're mapping the experiences for. So we've just started a piece of work at RG around personas. And first thing I would say about personas is give it a go. It's actually quite fun. It's quite creative and can be quite silly in places as well. And again, it doesn't need to be overly complicated or scary. And the idea is using your knowledge of the business as a people team, or speaking to people, or your data that you've got from your HRIS or whatever else it might be, creating fictional characters or personas that encapsulates the different types of people you might have in your business. Now, the approach we've taken, there's different ways to do this, by the way. You can go into varying levels of detail. Of course you can. We've decided to kind of bring it up a level where we're not including too much of the demographics, because quite often with personas, you can go, well, they're aged between 20 and 30, they this, that, and the other. And actually that is putting people in boxes. So what we've decided to do, and we've not even gone, you can go job specific, job role specific, even department specific. We've lifted out of that as well and taken it up a level to say, actually, it's more about their behavior and their kind of drive, what gets them into out of bed in the morning, and what excites them, what are their needs, and also what are their frustrations. And of course, you can overlay things like, information around different generations. You can overlay things about where they might be based in terms of their cultural nuances, because we're a global business. But actually, once you create, we've got 6 in a business of 1,000 as an example, so 6 personas. And you can put little names against them. We've got avatars against ours. We've got a rough idea of who we think these people are. And then, of course, the next bit is, how accurate are we? How close are we? Let's go out and ask people, hey, can you see yourself in any of these personas? We do a bit of a stress test to see whether people can picture themselves in what we're talking about. And then what you do, of course, with the personas is anything you're mapping out is stress tested against that persona. If we did X, how are these 6 individual personas going to feel about that? What are their pain points going to be? And it's just a really nice way of, let's say, having a bit of fun, understanding your people a little bit more, but just making sure that what you're doing is for the right people you have in your organization, rather than just doing it because you think it's the right thing to do.
Awesome. I've just seen a note that unfortunately we're not live on LinkedIn, but that's okay. We will move.
No,
it's all right. We'll send it to
it
everyone.
never works, does it?
Yeah, it's fine. Well, it's nice to see everyone on Zoom though. Good to see you guys are still hanging out. That's cool. We'll keep it rock. That's really interesting though, Chris. And I think like as someone who's worked in marketing, like I think persona can get so stuck in demographic that you almost lose the context. I love taking it that like step further, thinking sort of behaviorally. Rob, is that kind of how you would have thought about it as well?
Yeah, I tend to think, I tried to think in motivational terms, because it's the way that I think about motivation and the sort of theories that I've worked with in the past kind of look at motivations as lenses through which we see and experience the world. And therefore, if you can understand those basic motivation values, you might call them, beliefs around that different people have, then it makes a big difference. And you can get more scientific, and you can actually then get into how that might impact their emotions and things like that. But I do try and work with, it's kind of an overlay of some factual information, with, and demographics is probably part of it, but it is a little bit of it can be a slightly dangerous way of categorizing people. An overlay.
Isn't there the famous thing about Ozzy Osbourne and King Charles? Like on paper, but like they're both like 80-odd, live in a castle, white.
Yeah.
Like, they might well be the same person on paper, but they're not the same demographic. They're not the same persona for sure.
And their motivations are very different.
Yeah.
Or are they?
I've thought about that. That is a thought, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I became a grandmother last week, so if you put me in the grandmother persona, I'd lose my cool, right? Like that's not.
I was just going to say, stage of life is more useful than, for example, age. You have to think of things that have practical meaning to people. So, like in a 45-year-old, recent mother is more in common with a 20-year-old recent mother than a 20-year-old recent mother has with another 20-year-old. So it's an understanding what is going to actually change people's perceptions. And that will magnify at certain points in the life cycle. So you may start to, when you start to talk about things like, family friendly policies and things like that, you hone in on certain personas that are more specific elements of a persona.
Yeah. Chris, when it's also really important to understand the why. Like, why do we do it? Right? Like we really, it sounds like fun and it's a lot of work, but ultimately we're doing it for a really good reason, right? To understand also how, when we make decisions, what is the impact that the decisions for the business have on those 6 personas, or how much influence did those 6 personas have on the decisions we make? Right? Equally is important. And I don't want to get caught up on just the personas themselves. I think they're a really valuable tool, but they're one of many tools. And the important thing is why we're doing it, right?
Yeah. And to go back to Chris's earlier point, which was around, just starting with the basics, it's more important to map something out at key stages than it is to get all your personas absolutely right. It's like a layer, if you're getting into personas, you're already doing some good work, I think. It's thinking.
With your project with RG, Chris, where did you start with the persona thing? So like, it sounds really, because I could, again, you can think about it from demographics really easily. And I know you said it was around like the behaviors, but how did you go about figuring out what those 6 are? was it surveys? Was it interviews? Was it anecdotal? Like where did you begin and how did you get it?
Yeah, so we kind of use agile mindset in terms of iterations and getting things out and testing it pretty quickly. And we're also fans of evidence-based practice, right? And one of the streams of evidence-based practice is your professional knowledge. And so it's using the knowledge that we have as a people team of the business, using data, our surveys, our demographic data, that sort of stuff, and just creating a first draft. Hey, here's what we think based on what we know. Then it's taking that to the business, speaking to people, managers, leaders, people that our RGers themselves, and going, does this sound right to you? Like, here's a stab in the dark from your people team. What do you guys think? If the answer is absolutely not, don't recognize myself, and everyone says that, then we just go back to the drawing board, reiterate, and try again. But it's about you can tie yourself up in knots sometimes. Again, just thinking where to start. Just get something down. It literally can be a cartoon drawing on a Post-it note if that's all that gets you started, and then give it to people and say, what do you think? And then just go back around the circle a few times. But that's kind of how we've done it. It's just using our expertise of what we know as a people team already, and then driving it forward from there.
Almost like not gut feeling, but guesstimating perhaps where you think
educated guessing, I'd call it. Educated guess, and then moving forward. I mean, I'll be the first to say, as an HR team, people team, we don't always get things right, and in every HR business or HR team I've worked in, we don't always get things right, but we do have a level of knowledge, a level of expertise, a level of understanding of what we should do anyway of the businesses we're working in. So I think we have enough there to give it a go, and then seek feedback immediately and test and learn as I move it forward.
Chris, how much AI do you think you're going to start to apply to those personas going down? I mean, and then what's the danger of that?
Yeah, this is literally, I'm smiling because over the last 3 weeks, we've some of the people team have been to various different conferences, and the thing they come back with the most excitement, energy, gusto is AI. So it's literally the hottest topic of conversation within the people team at RG right now, myself included. And so we're dabbling in AI at the moment, is how I'd kind of think about it. Now, if we go back to the employee life cycle, so I've tasked our talent acquisition team, the recruitment team, to have me use AI to help us with things like inclusive language checking, job design and job descriptions, job advert writing, and we're just testing that stuff out at the moment. But we've very much got this mindset. Look, we're a technology company, right? So we've got to embrace technology if we don't be left behind. So we're trying to get ahead of the curve with AI, and we haven't plugged personas into it just yet. Maybe that's the next iteration.
I just wonder if there's a if X then Y. So you've got your 6 personas out there, and you plugged in all their data about who they are, what motivates them, whatever you've categorized them on.
It'd be really interesting.
And just say, if we do this, what happens, right? And just watch the 6 personas. I was speaking to somebody from a large firm, I won't name them, but they've done an internal ChatGPT within all the information they have within their organization, how they're using that to make decisions as well, and around hiring, around experience mapping. It's quite I actually think it's an opportunity. I think we need to be really mindful of the checks and balances, that we don't start to lean on AI so much that we go down the whole pigeonholing people, right? Like we've seen that I think actually, Ted, I think you and I spoke about it at our last talk, where, if we both punch something into Google, we would have completely different, and we wouldn't be shown the other ones, right? So we get shoveled into this one area. And so I'm so excited about AI, and I'm so excited about ChatGPT. I love it. But it does worry me that we're going to stop listening to people, right? Which all of us on this call, I know, are very much about listening and to people and what they really feel, and asking the open questions to understand them better.
And I think we have to be a little bit mindful of the difference between data science and AI as well. So, if you've got data science, can help you to identify clusters of patterns of information, and you have a look at those patterns of information, and you do the intelligent part of that, interpreting what that might mean and adding to that. Whereas if you put a full AI solution, that'll incorporate both the data science and the what does it mean element, and that is, you know, based on machine learning. So you can, you know, you don't need to go full AI to, you know, to do this stuff and to gain some of the advantages of, you know, that technology can bring.
Mm-hmm.
You could definitely scenario test way more scenarios, right, in less time.
Oh, that's where it shines as well. I watched this is really off topic, but I watched a video of someone using AI to beat Pokemon Red, the Game Boy game, and I think they stored 100,000 hours they were able to run the game in like something like a week. Wow. I know it sounds really trivial, but like you can start to do some really, really interesting stuff. But I think the risk, when I think about like the people profession and certainly the people I talk to about it, the risk is of the predictive algorithms, right? They're good at understanding large data sets and going, the likely next thing that would happen would be X or Y. And the risk, I think, there, and I'd be curious on your thoughts on this, particularly around when we think about mapping, is when you start to put, if that is the route we go down, are we going to create a lot of self-fulfilling prophecies about when people are going to leave our business, how they're going to exit, how they're going to feel? Like, is that one of the risks that we have of kind of combining this technology and the people side of things?
Yeah, I mean, just from my perspective with that, the way one of the key things people experience mapping is the people themselves, right? The actual human beings and the voice they've got and the feelings they're having or the experiences they're feeling at that particular moment in time or throughout their time with your business. That always for me is number one in terms of mapping these things out, getting things right, iterating, keeping it organic and keeping it dynamic. If we can use technology like AI to simplify something to do it quicker for us so we can spend more time listening and doing, then I'm all for it. I don't see a point in the future. I'm sure, who knows? I might be proven wrong in the next 5 to 10 years time. I don't know. I cannot foresee a point in our world of people's experience where we would disregard the thoughts of the people and listen to a machine. We use the machines to help us map it a little bit more swiftly and the science to help us kind of overlay what people are telling us. But that employee voice always for me is number one.
Yeah,
and because think about what you just said, people experience. Those two things are the exciting part.
Yeah.
Not the predetermined outcomes, right? Not the forecasting, not the, you know, deciding on their behalf. I mean, what's always been so interesting to me and fascinating to me is the zig and zag that people can take when, you know, if you think they're going left and all of a sudden they go right and you go, okay, what happened there? Like that's the fun part. That's the richness. And personas to me is an attempt at mass personalization, right? It's trying to get it right for a select group of people.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right, Chris, about, you know, that the listening is important. And it's hard to see us stepping away from that listening. It's not just because listening is good and produces something insightful and helpful to us, but the process of involving people in that, the process of listening to people is valuable to them. 100%. So by shortcutting that completely, you might not, but you might get the same sort of, you know, insights, if you like, from the process. But you don't get the sort of, if you like, the softer benefits from doing that, the feeling that people are being involved and listened to.
Mm-hmm. I want to. Sorry, did you say?
Sense of belonging, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It just goes back to people want to feel like they belong, and in order for that to happen, Rob, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we might get the outcomes, but all the auxiliary benefits of people feeling heard, people feeling a sense of belonging, people feeling that you care, and that empathetic approach. I mean, we wouldn't have talked about empathy 10 years ago, 5 years ago even. And today it's, you know, we wouldn't have talked about employee experience 5-6 years ago as much as we are now. And there's so many great things that I believe have come out of a horrible situation like the pandemic, and that we truly are spending more time and attention listening and really getting to the heart of what makes people tick and what makes them happy, and how do we delight them, right? We're competing with the home in workplace, and you know how are we going to make sure that when they come to work they want to do it time and time again? It's not because it perpetuates it, right? We are social animals, right? And I see people now who before the pandemic didn't really come in and now are coming in. because they don't want to miss that. They don't want to miss that opportunity of connection.
I think that's really important. And it goes back to the point I raised right at the start, I think, is start with you, like you as a human being. It's easy, whoever's registered for this webinar, I've got a feeling most of them probably HR professionals in some guise or another, right? HR are always the ones to do what we say, not what we do type thing, right? And we always leave ourselves behind when it comes to how we feel about things. And so if you just have that at the forefront of your mind, how would you feel in a situation, in a particular part of your career, or if technology was being used instead of people listening to you? If you feel that way, chances are other people are feeling that way as well. So start with yourself. That'll help you empathize much more with everyone else.
Find the lens of people experience is a really useful way of thinking about this, because to a point that Deb was saying, 5 years ago we wouldn't have talked about people experience. We would have talked about employee engagement, which is not like a bad thing in and of itself. The challenge you've got with it is it's kind of an outcome, right? Employee engagement isn't something universal. It's not something that we're all thinking and feeling. Whereas like when we think about experience is what happens to you and how do you feel about it? Like it is really that, and that is universal. We all go through, we all have things like, I think one of the things we talked about right at the beginning was when we look at all of the different stages of employee experience mapping was the moments that matter. Those seem to be the things that really like trigger certain things. And those could be really big things. They could be things that happen to you in your personal life. I think having kids, getting married, nice. Bereavement, that could be these terrible and awesome things that happen to you, like have a huge impact on the rest of your life, but also on your working life. Chris, when we thinking, I know when we were talking a bit about that at the beginning, like those different stages, I guess like how do you understand what those moments are for people? Like, do you just sort of have a great sense because you're kind of a person, you have those experiences, or do you go out and ask people? Like, how do you begin understanding what those different stages of your employee life cycle look like?
All of the above. So definitely what it feels like for you is key, as I've mentioned a couple of times. But yeah, I mean, the key to all of this is who we're doing it for, right? Our people. So whether that's through your surveys that you do, pulsing, whether it's listening groups, focus groups, exit data, stay data, every other type of data you can gather, whatever way you want to do it to listen to your people, that helps you identify what really matters to people. A lot of it's common sense. If you think what's important to someone in the onboarding process, as an example, if you're trying to map out your onboarding journey for people, but it's common sense that people want to feel like they've made the right decision when they've joined. They know where they're going, and they've got tech that works when they want it to work. And that's just common sense. You don't need to be an expert in HR or data science or anything else to work that bit out. So start with that. Start with those bits, figure that bit out, because to your point, Ted, about the engagement bit being the output, it's quite often, if you get those little what we would probably class as trivial common sense things right, it sets everything else up to be successful and much easier. If you take your eye off those little trivial things, then quite often the house of cards falls down, because those are the things, particularly in things like attraction and onboarding, if people are feeling a certain type of way from the get-go, rightly or wrongly, or good or bad, then that sets their experience up, and it's difficult to bring it back if it's on the wrong side of where you'd like it to be. So yeah, common sense is where I suggest we start.
And think in emotional terms, who hasn't felt nervous before they started a new job? You arrive and people are friendly and they're warm. You get all the things that you need. You're told, where you're going to be for the first few days. You're given you settle down, and that can turn into you start really feeling more excited about the whole thing. Turn it around, and you've got somebody sitting there with their head in their hands. I can remember being there, but I've done that myself, sitting there with my head in my hands, going, "What have I done?" It can almost be as instant as that first week, and so we can all relate to those kind of experiences, or we know people that have had those. So just really try and think in terms of those emotions. So it's like, at every stage there are probably some legislative elements, things we have to do right. There are things that we want to do right, processes stuff. There's how do we want people to feel now, and then why, and that's your outcome. and you were talking about engagement. Even if you only think in terms of engagement, well, okay, what's going to lead people towards being more engaged? Then that's helpful. But think more specifically. What is it we want people to do? Do we want people to go tell their friends what a great start they've had? Do we want them to do something else? It's engagement is great, but it's also, as we talk about quite a lot, it can sort of be a bit of a catch-all that masks some of the things that you might really care about.
Yeah, I think I've got a good example that we use at our gym. I've used this in previous businesses. Think about onboarding specifically. So just, one of the beginning stages of what we're talking about here. You can talk about your detail of, I don't know, on day one, for example, hearing about the strategy of the business, the history, the culture, learning how to use your tech properly, how to log into this, that, and the other, complete your security training that you got to do, whatever, all that sort of stuff. That's all fine. It's important to map all of that out and be aware of what that stuff is. But it is stuff, right? So one of the things we try and overlay at each of the different stages of our people experience mapping is, what's the feeling we want to leave them with? So if we take onboarding as the example, if you take all that stuff away, so all of the stuff they've got to actually do, if when they're home at the end of their first day or first week, or they're catching up with their friends or their family over dinner that night, and I was, how was your first day at your new job? If the answer is anything other than it was amazing, you have failed. So that's the bit, and you can work backwards from that. So whatever you put in place, whatever processes you have, the feeling you leave them with is the crucial part of this experience, and that allows us just to make sure we have that line of sight. The stuff you've got below it to get to that point is just stuff, and that can be changed and moved as you need to, but the feeling should always be consistent.
Because day one's the honeymoon day. If you get that wrong, and CIPD has said that 60% of retention is all down to the onboarding.
Yeah.
Right. It's how you manage that process and how you make them feel. And Maya Angelou, it doesn't matter who you are or what you do, it's how you make them feel that they're going to remember. And I believe that's true. And I think that for a long time, we spent a lot of time, we spent a lot of focus, as we should, on our customers and who they are and what they like and what their hobbies are and what they drink and what their kids do and what are their promotions and where's their business going and yada, yada, yada. And I really, I'm doing a lot of conversations with organizations now to say that you need to switch that lens to your team. It's about personalizing the experience for them. If you have, the ups and downs, as you said, Ted, at the beginning, whether it's, if somebody, don't send flowers to everybody for everything, right? That's not a personalized approach. If you wanted to accolade or acknowledge something, if you're giving out annual gifts to your team, try and personalize them and use your personas. Right? That's another great thing. It's like these personas are outdoor, extreme sport people. Well, we can do something for that. These people really like gardening. These people are really big in food. These people, because that's all part of the persona too. And you can start to personalize it so that, you're making that effort for them specifically. And then it's how you make them feel. And I remember I started with one organization, and the very day I started, a bottle of champagne and flowers arrived at the door. And it was during lockdown. And I was just like, wow, that's never happened, right? That's never happened. We're my very first day. Welcome to the firm. Like, we're so excited to have you. And it changed. It really did set up. And I'm still talking about it years later. And
it's funny. I was just thinking, like, I can't think of very many of the specifics of the onboardings that I've had at any business, really. But I remember very distinctly how I felt at every single one. Like, that's the thing that really lingers with you, is the how it left you. That's what I guess what you keep. I kind of want to, before we start thinking about wrapping up, I just the thought occurs to me about, so we've identified all our personas. We've identified the different stages of a journey that someone goes all the way from. Even pre-onboarding, from applying to the job all the way through to becoming an alumni member and potentially an advocate for the business. What's next, though? Once you've got all this information, you've got it down. Where do you go from there? What is the next thing you want to do? I'll throw that. Let's start actually with Chris, because I feel like it's probably something you're working on right now.
Yeah, well, the thing we want to do is stress test it. So this is, again, it's come back to the point of we've got some knowledge, but we've only got half the knowledge. Our people have the rest of it, right? So let's go out and what we're actively doing, ask our people, does this sound right to you? Think back to when you started. Is this how you felt or what you would have wanted or needed from us? What are the bits that is missing, and just iterate and keep moving along. And, I think I said right at the beginning, or one of the questions was, we don't need to overcomplicate these things, and keep them simple, and that just allows you to keep them live. So that's the key to all of it, is once you've got it down on paper or on a piece of technology, or whatever way you want to do it, take it out to your people and just ask them, does this sound right to you, and see what they think.
Love that. And Deb, what about you? Once you've done all this work and you've identified all these different things, what do you do next with it? Where does it go with you?
I think for me, there's two things really. It's not a one and done, right? The world changes rapidly. And so we can't just say, great, we got our 6 personas, we're done, we've got it, we're good. Because the world's moved. And then so how those people react with the world is changed. And so certain elements of who they are, what they want, or what's important to them might change. And I think it's this constant evaluation and pivot and measurement, to make sure that you're still on the right track, going back and sense checking, as Chris rightly said. And I think the other thing is to share that information. So oftentimes we do these personas and there's very few people. It might be HR, it might be the workplace strategy team that have access to that. Why would we limit that? If we're giving people insights into their own team members, we need to be sharing that, and then educating. Where I think we get it really wrong is we're not educating, particularly middle managers, on how to use that information effectively and how to make sure that we're serving our team members better.
Love that. Finally, Rob, you've completed the work. What next?
Well, I think it may have been implied, but I think it's worth making it explicit that it's not an academic exercise. The goal is not to create a map or even to keep updating that map, but to hold up the processes and policies and things to it and make changes as a result, so that actually you're delivering on that experience.
Beautiful. So succinct as well. I love it. I believe that brings us very, very close to the end. Unless anyone has any final questions, have you seen the 3 questions? No, I have not seen the 3 questions. If you could resend them to me, Sav, because I'm sure if they're good, I would really like to.
They're at the bottom in the Q&A thing.
Oh, I can't see that. That's me being. I can see them now.
So you just have to open that up.
Let's go. Can you share at high level what you would try and capture for each persona, Chris?
Yeah, good question. So in very simple terms, it's a bit of a backstory. So that's where you can be as creative as you like. That is thinking like a marketeer. We think about what their needs are. So what do they need, in our case, from RG, and perhaps what they need from the role itself and what they need from people they work with. Then we also just overlay on top of that the typical skills and behaviors you'd expect that person to either have or want to have now or in the future. And then to Rob's point earlier on, what's their motivators? Like what kind of gets them going? What gets them out of bed in the morning? And then I think it's really also important to point out, I think sometimes mapping can be done and you always focus on the positives, the good stuff, the exciting stuff. It's important to call out the stuff which frustrates or annoys people as well, because that allows you to try and minimize whatever you do in that space. And that's kind of where we start. It's just those kind of 4 or 5 headers and build it out from there.
Beautiful. Anything to add, Mr. Robson or Mrs. Ward?
No, that was great.
Fantastic. This is a really interesting one from Charlene. As a HR generalist, I would describe I've got what's an EX mindset. How would you suggest making a transition from kind of EX to CX, or from sort of CX to an EX kind of way of thinking? And are there any particular qualifications or methodologies that you would use? Because I know that's exactly the journey you've been on, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I don't come from a CX or UX background. I've come from a learning and development background, and just kind of over the years, my role has just transgressed as the industry has transgressed into something different, which is now employee people experience. Are there any qualifications? I don't think you need qualifications necessarily. Perhaps you might have done 5-10 years ago to boost your CV and that sort of stuff. But actually, I think the word is experience. So have experience with people is key to this. But in terms of methodologies and different things to think about, there are a few different things that are hot topics of conversation at the moment. We've talked about AI, which is an obvious one. But things like design thinking, I think Charlene had mentioned it, really, really important. Using agile methodology, and we're not talking about flexible working. We're talking about the mindset of agile, of customer first, quick and dirty, feedback instantly, all that.
Agile with a capital A, right?
With a capital A, exactly. Yeah. And there's some people in the HR industry who are doing amazing work in this space, and I'll shout out a few of them if that's helpful to people. Yeah. Perry Timms, I'm sure some people might be familiar with. He's looking at a new model of HR. Natal Dank does a lot of work in the agile HR space, and I'll shout out our own RG's Nabel Crowhurst as well. So she's our chief people officer, and she's a bit of a voice of expertise in this space as well. So all of these people I'd recommend following on socials and connecting in with them to see what they're up to.
Very strong. Deb, I'm sure you've got a view on this as well, coming from, I get, blending those two things together in your roles.
Yeah, one's an internal customer and one's the external customer. I think the element that you talk more about with CX is value for money. And I think with EX is value for time. So I think that's kind of the difference between the two, really, the richness between the two. But ultimately, people are people. They want to be treated with dignity, respect, and grace. And I think it's the same for both. I think as far as experience, you're absolutely right. I think experience is what gives you experience in this field. And also self-learning. Like, there's so much information out there. Harvard Business Review does something kind of every month on the experience. Forbes is doing a lot on it. There's what's his name? Jacob does a lot on it. Jacob Morgan. There's some great things there. Deloitte is always putting out information. There's some really great books out there as well around people experience. The Experience Charter. There's one that I just finished reading, which is Virtual Leadership, because I think one of the things I did want to bring up today was, let's just be really mindful that with hybrid working, that we don't leave people who are not in the office behind, right? That's mapping that experience is really, really, really important, and more important now than ever before. So whether it's in a third-party space or from home, or we tend to go, well, they're not here, they're out of sight, out of mind. But yeah, there's so much to do. There's lots of information out there, and every day is a school day. Ted, you and I both say that all the time. And it's about self-learning. Like, just grab the information that's out there, read, and go and talk to people. Go and talk to different organizations. If you want to know how to make a space really efficient, look into the back of an ambulance, right? Like, it's really about changing your paradigm about where you're going to get your information and your experience and your insights and your innovations from.
One final thing, just to build on Deb's point there, was having all the knowledge and the theory is great, but the key to this stuff is just give it a go. Like, you're not going to do anything wrong. If you control a test group or do it as a pilot or just try it out, just dabble in it, see what you think and see the results that you get. That's how I always learn to do it. Just give it a bash and see what happens, and you just iterate and learn from there.
And everybody I've spoken to is really open to a conversation. Like, if you pick up the phone and call even competitors and say, listen, I'm struggling with this. Can you give me, it's like, can we have a conversation about it? And again, I go back to you are because we are, or I am because we are.
I think it's also really true. Something we touched on in this webinar in general is that people are, and particularly when we look at experience mapping or any of that stuff, people are, the way of looking at it anyway, is a blend of art and science, and means there's lots of right answers, is the truth of the matter. And with that piece of stage, that brings us to the end of our webinar today. I know. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon. My beautiful panel, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend the last hour getting into this. Thank you so much for your time, energy, insight, and general smarts. For those of us who are still with us, we will be sending this around as a recording, so feel free to share it with your friends. We will also you'll see a few of these snippets coming out on social media over the next few weeks. If you have any questions, feel free to pop myself, Rob, Chris, or Deb a message. I am sure, as Deb has already stated, that she'd be more than happy to jump on a call with you and tell you all about the things that she already knows lots and lots about. But for now, I shall love you and leave you. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. It's a Thursday. And have a excellent to each other. Peace out. Have a nice afternoon.
Cheers.